Kia ora koutou, this series is about sex, which you have probably figured out by now. In this episode, though, there are also outdated attitudes, there is a bit of swearing, there is a bad breakup. Perhaps most alarmingly, there are several bad puns. Some names and locations have been changed, and this podcast was made with the support of New Zealand On Air.
Scroll through your feed right now and you might be seeing a fair bit from a particular kind of person. They live alone, travel alone, eat dinner alone, maybe even girl dinner. And they look good, peaceful, glowy, unbothered.
Complete control over your life.
You get to decide what's going to make you happy.
Financial freedom and self-actualization, I never believed I could achieve.
Like, you're so happy. I love to see it. Like, what do you got, a new man? Like, what? If I had a new man, I'd be miserable. This glow, this is me.
7 more things that I love about being single and living alone. Number 1, no one guilting me for wearing clothes to bed. 2, I eat what I want when I want.
People tell me I'm glowing, I'm thriving, doing well. It's when I'm not focused on men at all.
Online at least, singleness has a newfound confidence. Like, maybe it doesn't need to explain itself anymore. Like it might even be something to aspire to.
Single women
and married men
are the happiest.
I've been the happiest groups of people.
Let's advocate for policies that support a family of one.
There's nothing wrong with being single. There's nothing wrong with being alone.
Men are like salt.
The seasoning makes it a little bit better, but it's not necessary.
You actually have the space to work out what makes you truly happy.
But this is a relatively new story. In movies and television from the 90s and noughties, think Muriel's Wedding, Bridget Jones's Diary and Sex and the City, being single was a problem, something to fix. You had to find your Mark Darcy, ideally before turning 33 and dying alone, found 3 weeks later half-eaten by Alsatians. That's not my line, by the way, that was Bridget Jones's actual stated fear. And while all this pressure often landed hardest on women, men had their own version of the script. Grow up, commit, settle down, find the right woman, and then you'll understand. Different expectations, same ending. Singledom was a waiting room. Sex and the City might have made it glamorous, given it a rabbit vibrator and a newspaper column, but even Carrie ended up with Big. The clock was still ticking. Then from the early 2010s came the apps. Suddenly you could optimize your search for the one. More options, more efficiency, more control. Same destination, but a much slicker on-ramp. And then, really quite recently, something shifted. Maybe it was the pandemic, which forced us all inside and made a lot of us quietly reassess what and who we actually needed. Maybe it was a generation that watched their parents' marriages up close and wasn't that impressed. Whatever it was, the script didn't just change, it collapsed. And into that gap walked the girl with the solo dinner reservation, the vacation tan and the face that says, "I'm thriving actually." And the guy who tells you he's not dating, he's building. He's in monk mode. He's got a morning routine, a high-protein diet and a 5-year plan. A relationship would just be a distraction from the grind. But how much of this is real and how much of it is just a better-looking waiting room? In this episode, we meet 2 people in their 40s navigating singleness in a world that still can't quite decide what to make of it.
I get told all the time how much I deserve love.
Do I just desire the Cinderella story, or do I really want someone in my life?
Plus, one of the world's leading experts on singleness, Bella DePaulo, on why the story we tell about solo living might be more political than we think.
Single people are subsidising the couples.
And what she'd say to anyone who's looked at their single life and thought,
I love being single. It's my best life.
I'm Melody Thomas, and this is episode 3 of The Good Sex Project, The Waiting Room. I'm in a gorgeous little apartment in central Wellington. This is my city. I've lived here all of my life, but my place is out in the burbs. This apartment is a couple of minutes off Cuba Street. I've only been here a few times, but every time, basically the moment I walk in, I'm offered a freshly made cocktail, usually with a special seasonal twist, by a host.
Welcome to my boudoir.
This is Beth. Beth's a 42-year-old babe about town who gets a lot done and always looks awesome while she's doing it. Her pronouns are she, her, and she initially told me she was hetero-flexible. When I asked what that meant to her, she said,
I have been with women and attracted to women, but men give me boners.
You're more horny for boys.
Yeah.
Yes, well, there's definitely people listening who are going, babe, that's still bi. But
Well, look, here I am saying that I am bi.
bi, hetero-flexible, demisexual. Beth has ADHD, so we won't make her choose. She was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult 10 years ago. And neurodiverse listeners might also relate to this, but Beth's occasionally been described as too much.
I am extremely extroverted and my social tank is enormous.
I think she's just right.
Someone said, Beth, you live the shit out of your life.
I met Beth a few years ago and we bonded pretty immediately. Like me, she doesn't have much of a filter, and I was always going to love somebody who started off a conversation with stuff like,
I was a really horny kid.
Or, hang on, here's another one.
When I was a teenager, I called my dad a penis. I was like, shut up, Dad, you're such a penis. And Mum goes, now, Beth, a penis is a very beautiful thing.
For this interview, Beth and I have clambered up a little ladder to a romantic mezzanine filled with cushions and fairy lights and a movie projector. It's not a date, but we will be talking about dating and love and sex and about not being in love.
When I am actively single, it's definitely some of the easiest times of my life and happiest. So is that not as worthy, you know?
Beth's a romantic through and through. Always has been, always will be. And her ADHD has upped the ante, emotionally speaking.
I was always just having huge crushes.
For Beth, crushes and dating have always involved navigating passionate, intense hyperfixation in the early stages.
Just being able to feel those big emotions and love the story of romance and, you know, like little kind of serendipitous things have happened. I just like absolutely lap that up.
But then when the dopamine rush fades, the interest fades with it.
Once you settle into what would be considered more of a normal relationship, it sort of fizzles out.
She has a great analogy for this pattern.
It feels like I'm in a video game and you're going through the level, which is dating, which is a nightmare. And there's hurdles and gremlins and all that kind of stuff. And you think that you get to the end of the game when you find someone and you meet that match. And
that's the final boss.
But then you realise if you get that connection and then suddenly you're just on level 2. Yeah. And then you just, you know, you fall over in the first few seconds and you're back to square one. Like you don't even get to...
Get the multiple lives.
Yeah. And then you just have to start the game again.
Over her life, Beth's reached level 2 on World of Woocraft or Call of Booty. No, okay, I'm going to stop, sorry. Beth's reached the 1 or 2 year relationship mark a handful of times, and she had one that lasted 4 or 5 years, which we're going to hear about soon. But every time there's a breakup, she has to start the game again, and then the same old thoughts come back to haunt her.
Like, what am I doing wrong? And that has, at its lowest, manifested as, why aren't people willing to commit to me?
But more and more, as she's gotten older and had more time to puzzle all of this out, Beth's thinking has started to shift.
Maybe if we'd had this conversation, 4 years ago, then it would have been a lot different. I was a real people pleaser and really did think something was wrong with me, and I had to change who I was and not be my full authentic self in order to be in a relationship. I just don't feel that anymore.
But it's been a journey to get to this place of self-acceptance, and it hasn't been an easy one.
It took really losing myself to somebody. I just wanted it so bad that I lost myself entirely.
Let's rewind a decade. Beth is 32. If you're younger than that, you're going to think it's old, but trust me, it's not. 32 is still a tiny, tiny baby. Baby Beth is managing a festival at a time when craft beer, manicured facial hair and tech are all going off in Wellington. When she meets someone, let's call him Tim.
It started as a friendship, but there was very clear fireworks.
Beth and Tim were both in relationships when they first met, but the sparks were immediately obvious.
Everyone was like, what's the deal with those two?
And eventually, the fireworks caught, and they started dating. But they did keep it secret for quite a while.
And so that came with all of that, the sort of dopamine hits of just like clandestine meetups and that kind of thing. But actually, just zero nurturing for my soul. And I have been so bad in the past of putting in my own boundaries of saying, this doesn't make me feel good. I don't want this, because I was so scared to lose it and to be alone. I then finally plucked up the courage to say, I can't do this anymore. Either you love me and we do this, or you don't. It took like less than 24 hours for him to come back and be like, no, I really want to do this.
This should have been a really happy moment. Finally, Beth and Tim were going to take their love out of the shadows and into the open.
And I remember ringing my sister and saying, why do I feel deflated?
I think part of the answer is in the things that we value as a society. This culture will congratulate a couple for 50 years of marriage, even if they haven't had a real conversation in all of that time. Basically, any relationship, good, bad or average, gets treated as better than no relationship.
You know, society tells you that this is the ultimate goal.
But there's a good chance that Beth's ADHD was also playing a part.
So much of that relationship was about the chase. And so then actually when you get it, that game is over.
You don't have to have ADHD to relate to this, but it's a pretty classic description of the ADHD brain in love. It's not about being fickle or unable to commit. It's that the uncertainty and the novelty, the will they, won't they, it's not just exciting, it's neurologically necessary. The chase delivers exactly the kind of dopamine hit that ADHD brains are wired to seek out. Which means that period where the relationship was a secret was on some level the perfect drug, even though Beth had very real doubts about it.
I wasn't overly sure if he would be a caring partner.
There seem to have been signs of this from pretty early on.
It was very much on his terms, and I guess some warning signs of controlling behaviour, of like how I should act and that I shouldn't be a certain way.
It was actually during their will they, won't they period that Beth got her ADHD diagnosis.
Often at night, if I wanted to have a conversation and it was about the relationship and it was shut down, and then obviously I got upset, it was always asking whether I'd taken my meds.
In my opinion, using someone's diagnosis to dismiss their feelings isn't concern, it's control. Anyway, 5 years in, which includes that period of secrecy, things came to a head and they broke up. At the time, Beth and Tim were living together and she'd rented out the apartment we were doing this interview to somebody else, so she couldn't come back here right away. She booked herself into an Airbnb for a 2-month-long heartbroken wallow.
I spent most of the time in bed doing Sudoku. Do you know what's hysterical is that because I left a pen stain on the sheets
from all the Sudoku.
Yeah. My Airbnb review now says, great guest, however left stains on the sheets.
Doesn't specify.
It does not specify what the stains are, that I'm just like, I'm just this bed soiler.
You'll be really good at Sudoku though now.
I am sensational. I am expert level, actually. And then once I got back into this apartment, I just remember being back in here and just being like, fuck it, this is me, this is my place, I'm home.
Beth had returned to herself, or she'd started to.
From there, I remember watching The School of Life, Alain de Botton, and it was about how we are so scared to be alone. And I remember just this one quote that he said, and it was like, not until you're happy with the idea of being alone for the rest of your life, only then are you ready to be in a relationship. And I said out loud, oh, fuck. Because I knew that I wasn't there, and I knew that that was going to take a lot of work to get there.
We're going to come back to Beth and follow her along as she figures all of that out. But first, I want to introduce you to somebody else.
Hi, I'm Scott. I'm 40 and I live in Auckland. I like to practice yoga, and I've been trying a lot harder this year with meditation.
Scott isn't the kind of person that opens a conversation with that info, by the way. I asked him to share his hobby so I could check his sound level. Scott's non-binary. He asked me to use he/him pronouns for our interview, and he generally dates men. But the road to figuring out all of that was a slow one for Scott.
I grew up in a time when the major queer reference was Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Maybe you had Will and Grace. I actually rewatched Buffy the Vampire Slayer recently, and there is a lesbian relationship there and one random gay character for about 5 minutes. Like, it was still a bit taboo even, or undesirable. It's probably the best word to use.
Scott's earliest crushes were on girls, though. As he developed, he realised there wasn't really a sexual component to those. To Scott's horror at the time, it appeared that those feelings were reserved for boys.
But I was shit scared to do anything about the gayness. I hit sort of rock bottom when that's never going to happen. I don't know what to do.
Then when he was 18, Scott went away for a weekend with his friends, and him and one of the other boys shared a kiss.
Just being drunk and silly, and that was so long ago.
After the friend group got back home, Scott and this other boy made a plan to meet up again.
I could barely look, because I was drunk the night before I could kiss him, and then when I was sober, even though there's no one else in the room, no risk of anything, I couldn't do it. It was really, really confronting. I think we had to put the blankets over our heads, or I had to.
By his early 20s, Scott had come to accept these things about himself, and he came out to his parents.
I used to smoke cigarettes back then. I was like, I'm going to want to have a cigarette immediately after, so I'm going to come out with both things. I'm gay and I smoke.
Mum was silent for a moment.
She's like, oh, I don't know about the second thing, but the first thing's fine. And she said she'd known since I was at kindergarten.
Classic.
Scott's dad didn't mind. He'd come out himself a few years before this.
And I was like, oh my God, I am the only gay person in the world with a gay parent. This is crazy. And then it wasn't till I actually slept with a guy whose mother was a lesbian. I was like, oh, this is actually a lot more common than expected.
Through his 20s, Scott met lots of guys. He had a few flings, lots of hot nights, and one pretty long-term relationship, which lasted 5 years before fizzling out.
It was an amicable end. We both decided that it had kind of run its course romantically. We kind of became brotherly in a way. We're still really close friends, which is nice.
That relationship ended in 2018, and after the initial heartache began to subside, Scott found himself in a pretty good place. He wasn't really interested in getting into another relationship.
I just kind of wanted to be sexually a bit freer, but also process what had happened, what we'd been through, and who I was then.
Just as Scott's starting to think maybe he'd like a relationship again,
COVID hit.
Shit.
I'm back at home alone.
Bubble of one.
Fuck. Yeah.
And so began 7 years of singledom.
Yeah, and then I just haven't met anyone where it sort of worked out, I guess.
Which, at first, wasn't a big deal.
I think the first 4 years, totally fine. I spent a lot of time alone. My work was quite alone, and I did live alone for a lot of that period.
He was alone, but he wasn't lonely until recently.
The alone time has been a bit more bit darker at times.
And it's led to some less healthy behaviours.
Like you have a not so good day and you end up having a couple of glasses of wine, even if it's not really intense, becomes a Band-Aid. You don't really work through that darkness properly.
In 2023, Scott took a year off drinking. It was really good for him, but sometimes he did really miss having that Band-Aid in a bottle.
A couple of times there was like these quite dark, depressive moments. They didn't last for really long periods, but some of that inner monologue would frame itself around, you're alone, no one wants you, everyone else is with someone.
We've all had moments like this. When you're feeling low, lonely, or like a failure, the brain is so good at pointing out all the ways that everyone else around you is succeeding. As Theodore Roosevelt may or may not have said, comparison is the thief of joy. And for Scott in these moments, the pictures that his brain was serving up were idealised snapshots of happy couples holding hands, having kids, buying their first home, all things that he hadn't done himself, but which, interestingly, he didn't even really want for himself, aside from the holding hands part.
But when you're in a darker headspace, it becomes fuel for the fire. You don't have those things because you're not good enough, or your life hasn't worked out as well as other people's have, yeah. There's obviously some sort of programming in our minds. I mean, I grew up in a nuclear family. I was given all sorts of Disney stories as a kid around, you'll grow up, you'll meet someone, it'll be amazing, this is how it'll all unfold. And then you have to get rid of it all later, unlearn all these lies, essentially, about how human interactions and relationships work. And yeah, I wonder sometimes what it is that I actually desire. Do I just desire the Cinderella story? Or do I really want someone in my life? And what does that mean?
Following her breakup with Tim, in between playing Sudoku and staining the sheets of her Airbnb, Beth had been asking herself a lot of the same questions about whether a relationship was something she actually wanted or just something she'd been taught she should want, something that she couldn't be complete without. She started seeing a therapist, got a promotion in the job that she loves, took pottery classes and found out she was actually pretty good at it. She also put some time and energy into rekindling the friendships that she'd let slip a bit during her relationship.
I've never felt more lonely than when I was in that relationship. So alone, and had been cut off from a lot of those networks that I had built up.
As we heard Beth say at the beginning of this episode, her social tank is enormous. She's someone who likes to go out and connect and share banter and talk shit. But when she was in that relationship, and to some degree in any relationship she's ever been in, Beth's focus had been pulled in one direction.
What I used to do is look to that one person to fill that tank and do what I could for that person and bring joy to that person's life. But then it's not healthy, and that's not that great for the other person either.
Well, it's one of the myths that we are sold is that we'll find a person who meets every one of our needs and we meet every one of their needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes a while to untangle that and be like, oh, actually community and friendship and all of those things, that we can spread that load more widely than that one person.
Yeah. And I've really had that realization recently that has come from good, healthy, long periods of singledom and building those connections and intimacy. And I don't mean that in a sexual way. The other day, I helped my friend paint her room. Picked her up, we went down to pick up some paint and the paints and paintbrushes and things. Went back to her place, painted this room, listened to music, and at the end of the day, sat out on her deck, drank a beer, and I was like, this is partnership. It's like a beautiful jigsaw puzzle, you know, and I can get this kind of thing from that person and just take up a lover to fix the rest.
Being alone's not the same as being lonely. Scott explained this difference well.
Alone is the being physically on your own. And you're reading a book, having a nice time, having a bath, cooking. Loneliness is a mental space where you could be in a crowd of people. You could be with some of your best friends and still feel incredibly alone.
One of these is neutral, even pleasant. The other's distressing. And the difference is connection. As humans, we need to feel connected to other humans to thrive. We've learned a bit about that over the series and especially in the last episode of the podcast. If we don't have connection, we suffer, which I think goes a long way towards explaining our current cultural preoccupation with this.
Men are struggling more than ever now. There is a male loneliness epidemic, and as a divorce lawyer, I see it all the time.
There's no male loneliness epidemic. You're just a fucking weirdo.
Ask for help. Do anything you can, because real strength isn't silence.
They don't want you.
It's just being
they don't want you. You actually have to be likable to find someone.
When women are lonely, they join a book club. When men are lonely, they become fascist and blame women for it. Okay.
People are worried about boys and men. They're lonely, disconnected, they're being recruited and exploited by manosphere influences and looks maxes, which don't make me explain it. You can Google it, and you probably should if you have a teenage son. Women are increasingly choosing to be single, which leaves some men feeling like they're not sure where they fit in anymore.
This is such a fucking cliche topic, like, oh, male loneliness. Males are lonely. Someone go get the males. But honestly, we don't.
Lonely,
we're all fucking lonely.
This is Tom Scott, a musician and rapper that we're going to hear more from later in the series. And he's right. When it comes to the actual research, this idea of a male loneliness epidemic doesn't stand up. Men and women experience loneliness about as much as each other. The difference is that women are more likely to have a wider network of support to tap into when the distress of loneliness overwhelms them.
I seen a thing the other day that women do way better in breakups than men, and widows actually report to be happier.
Yeah, and single women are happier.
Bro.
And single men are not.
Yeah, well, because women go and like strengthen their friend networks and, you know, put their time into resources that feed them and stuff. Men just go drink it away or something. You know, you're good, yeah, bro, all good. You know, it's that same old cliche. And the reason why this is like important, whether it's women or men, is the system's making us more lonely. This is not like an accident. This system, capitalism, not the system, fuck the system. The capitalism as a way of doing things, we're having less time to hang out. And there's no fucking third place. I was just about to catch up with my bro this morning and he's like, bro, this job fucked me over. Like I just had to go fix this job up, da-da-da-da. And we didn't catch up. So he's too busy. It's scary. It's scary to think that we're getting like more and more disconnected.
To Tom's point, I'm going to add another system that has a lot to answer for, which is the patriarchy. In her 2004 book, The Will to Change, feminist icon Bell Hooks argued that patriarchy's first demand of men isn't violence towards women. It's that men mutilate themselves emotionally, kill off the parts of themselves that feel. And this comes back to me all the time because it clarifies a major misconception, which is that patriarchy is a system that's against women and for men. In reality, it hurts men too. You can see it in the suicide data, the highest rates clustering around men aged 44 to 60, often post-divorce or separation, when the one relationship that invested everything in is gone and there's nothing left. No network, no male equivalent of the sisterhood, because that was policed out of them early. Scott gets this, even if his own experience has been a little different.
I mainly am friends with females. My sister's one of the people I'm closest to, so there's always that connection to go there if I'm really, really down. But I can see how for heterosexual men it might be a bit more difficult. Even if it's like hugs, touch, not even sexual touch, but just being around someone and putting your head on their lap while you watch TV or something. I feel like that's what two women might do that, but two heterosexual guys, probably not.
You've maybe picked up that Scott's a sensitive guy, someone who soaks up the horrors of the world, which understandably leaves him feeling a little deflated.
Yeah, the world's a pretty messed up place at the moment, and I'd rather place my hope in other places than me having someone next to me in bed. I would rather not spend tons of time craving for something that just isn't on the menu for me at the moment, apparently. You know.
That said, A truly caring partner could make the weight feel lighter.
Someone to hug you while you watch a genocide live streamed on your phone. I think that's sometimes the tough part.
For Beth, it's also about wanting companionship. She's a foodie, so the idea of coming home to somebody and sharing a meal with them, that's really important to her.
I love to cook so much. It's really depressing cooking for one. And also because I just want to be told I've done a good job. So I just want to cook and someone say, oh my God, this is yum.
But she actually already has that. Beth's been sharing her apartment with a flatmate for a few years now, and the arrangement works so well.
About 6 months ago, we're just sitting there watching TV and we'd made dinner together and maybe I'd made us a martini or something. And I was just like, I need to remember what this feels like. If I'm to ever live with someone again, this really easy, loving companionship, I need to remember this. But then I'm also just like, why does that have to change?
In 1960, the great Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung shared what he called his 5 pillars for a happy life, the basic factors for happiness in the human mind. They were fulfilling relationships, good physical and mental health, the ability to see beauty in art and nature, having meaningful work and reasonable living conditions, and a philosophical or religious perspective. Beth mentioned 5 pillars in our interview as well, but she's got her own version.
I have an incredible family, very close. I have great friends. I'm a little bit of a friend collector, but I nurture all of those. I have an awesome job. I love it. It's so fulfilling to me. And I own my own apartment.
According to Jung's list, Beth actually has all 5 pillars already, but by her own count, she's missing one: romantic love.
And it was this realization of going, well, actually, maybe it's a little bit unreasonable to expect all 5. All 5 be perfect. And that's okay. Because, it's actually quite rare to then get all 5.
Neither Beth or Scott are saying that they're swearing off of love forever. I think they're saying something more interesting than that, which is, what if the life I already have is enough? What if the love that's already here in my friendships, flatmates, my pets and family members, and the friends I'm yet to make, what if all of that counts just as much?
Sure, married people have the one, but many single people have the ones.
Bella DePaulo is an American social psychologist, blogger and author. She wrote the book Single at Heart, among others. And she's known since she was pretty young that she wanted to be single, not as a waiting room or a consolation prize, but as her actual, chosen, deeply satisfying life.
I have been single my whole life, and I will be single for the rest of my life. And that's because I love being single.
Except for most of that life, people have failed to believe her.
You get these dismissive answers like, oh, you just haven't met the right person yet. You're just fooling yourself. Or my current favorite, you'll change your mind. Well, I'm 72. I don't think I'm going to change my mind.
Back in 2015, DePaulo set up an online forum called the Community of Single People. It's now got 10,000 members plus from more than 100 different countries. And what brought these members to this group wasn't a feeling of loneliness or failure. It was a gap between the lives that they wanted to live and the structures and attitudes that appeared to be pushing back against them.
Married and romantically coupled people are advantaged in so many ways, in the workplace, in the marketplace, in the healthcare system.
Solo travellers pay more for hotel rooms. Car insurance costs more. A Netflix account costs the same whether you're one person or two. It's harder to buy in bulk at the supermarket, and unless you're flatting, your rent and power bill are yours alone. And then there's the social tax.
The assumptions in the workplace that if you're single, you don't have a life, so you should stay and cover for the married people when they want to leave early, or you should come in on the holidays. And just getting demoted by your friends who become coupled or married, and maybe you used to see them all the time. And then once they get into this serious relationship, then you're not in the couples club, so you're not part of that.
Scott actually talked about a version of this as well, about how sometimes his couple friends will organise group holidays and forget to invite him. It's pretty stink and it's deeply normalised, so much so that we barely notice it. After my interview with Scott, I was racking my brain for all the ways that I might have left out my single friends in exactly this way. Bella actually has a word for all of this, singlism, which is the stereotyping and discrimination against people who are single, the assumptions that their lives are smaller, that they're waiting, or they haven't quite made it yet. She pushes back hard on this kind of language.
There's so much stigmatizing of single people as being alone or lonely, or even the words we use as synonyms for single, like she's alone, he's unattached. Well, that's completely wrong. I have lots of people who are significant others to me. I'm not having sex with any of them, but I consider them significant. There's research showing that when people get married, they become more insular. They spend less time with their friends, they call their parents less often, whereas single people are out there still maintaining their relationships with the people who matter to them.
The world has a lot to say about single people, but one look at the community of single people and other forums like it, you'll find that single people also have a lot to say back.
We are happy and flourishing because we are single, not in spite of it.
The stories that have come out of these communities and in response to DePaulo's books have floored her.
Within the first couple of weeks after Single at Heart was published, I got more than 100 heartfelt emails and social media contacts, and even some handwritten cards sent by snail mail. One person said, "I have felt such a lightness, validation, and empowerment." Another said that reading Single at Heart was like finding a home.
Now, Bella doesn't get crushes. She's aromantic, so she doesn't want romance, and she's never felt the pull to find the one.
My vibes are for friendship. I can remember being at a social event recently and talking to this woman, and she was so interesting, and thought, yeah, that's friend material.
But fans of Single at Heart, members of the community of single people, they aren't all aromantic. They're just people who've looked at their lives while single and thought, you know what, this is good. This is me.
I want people to understand that for some people, single life is how they achieve their deep and fulfilling happiness. It's how they flourish. And if they married, that to them would be a lesser life.
I've got to say that even as someone who isn't single at heart, this approach does sound pretty appealing.
I love waking up in the morning or anytime I want and getting to arrange my day however I want, getting to eat whatever I want. And I go for long walks every day. And I like the big life-changing decisions that I get to make on my own. For example, in the year 2000, I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, thousands of miles away. And I loved it so much that instead of staying for a year, I wanted to stay forever.
And you just did it?
Yes.
Given the response to DePaulo's book, I wouldn't be surprised if right now someone's listening and having a bit of an out-of-body moment. Like, oh, I'm single at heart. Hopefully you're not married already. But we'll never actually know how many people feel this way because the messaging runs so deep with the Disney stories, the waiting room and the ticking clock that most of us have never even been able to ask ourselves honestly if romantic love's even something we need or want. We've never had a Bella in our lives or on our screens or in our earbuds modelling a different option. How many of Scott's darker moments, that voice saying, "You're alone, no one wants you," how much of that is genuine longing? And how much is just the program running? How much of the pain that Beth felt losing herself entirely to someone she wasn't even sure would be a decent partner came from a deep belief that without a partner she simply wasn't complete? Maybe they're single at heart, maybe they're not. Maybe their true love's just around the corner, but they deserve to know that a full, rich, chosen single life was something that existed, that it had a name.
I never heard of such a thing as wanting to stay single.
Bella was 18 when she set out on the pathway that would lead her to happily single at heart. She had no map, no community, and no language for it. But her readers do. And now, maybe, so do you. Let's go back to Beth and Scott one last time and see where they're at. While Scott isn't actively searching for love at the moment, he remains open to it if it shows up. But he's got some ideas about what that love might look like if it were made just for him.
I would want an open relationship, but not so I can have sex with a bunch of different people all the time. It's more like, as time goes on, the world around the two of you changes and morphs. And if you're still pretending like it's the same when you first got together, you kind of end up living in a box that's not fit for purpose anymore. And so for me, I would want something open that's more like talking about stuff. Got a crush? Tell me about it. Did something at the work do on Saturday night? That's okay, but don't hide it from me for the next 6 months.
Not a smaller love, but an honest one. And maybe that's what we've been building towards for this whole episode. Not a case for or against coupledom, but for paying attention to what's already there. For not sleepwalking past the love that's already in your life while you're busy waiting for the one. Beth and her friend drinking a beer on the deck after a day spent painting walls, or with her flatmate sharing a meal and a drink. Scott with his sister, or his best friend who just had a baby. Congratulations, by the way. The jigsaw puzzle. The ones. Scott got there slowly. 7 years of figuring out who he was without someone beside him.
I think cherishing those things is sometimes more important than hoping or wishing for my life to be different in some way. Yeah.
And Beth, well, you remember her video game analogy. She's updated some of her thoughts about it.
It's like not this big ending and the final boss or anything. It's just this quiet realization of just being suddenly getting a gold star. You could quietly clock to the level, you know?
Turns out the final boss was yourself all along.
Oh.
We started this episode in a waiting room. Bridget Jones was waiting, Carrie Bradshaw was waiting. All the real-life single people who were downloading and deleting and then re-downloading the apps were also there, were waiting. And maybe the wait's going to prove worth it. Maybe Beth will find her Mr. Darcy and Scott will find his Mr. Big. But life doesn't happen inside a waiting room. It happens out there, where your friends and your family are, the people who love you now. Whether you're single or coupled or somewhere in between, stop waiting for the one and start focusing on the ones, on the people who love you now, exactly as you are.
I know what I want in my life, and I'm enough.
I'm Melody Thomas. Thanks for listening. Coming up in the next episode of The Good Sex Project, we hear from some of the people working in the oldest profession.
Standard service would include kissing. French kissing is an extra.
About the realities of this often misunderstood industry.
Later, they said that they would pray for me, and I thought that was just an absolute sweet thing to say, because who can go wrong with more blessings?
We'll hear how technology continues to disrupt the landscape of sex work.
There's a lot of complications with hidden cameras at the moment.
And about the stigma that follows people home long after the working day is done.
There's a real attitude out there that, sex workers, they've chosen this job, they just have to deal with this.
See you next time.